Non-Standard Rugby Podcast with Lawrence Dallaglio.
Well, you'll be pleased to know that I'm back. All my newfound Welsh rugby fans will be delighted as well and tuning in. I made it back from France safely via 2 trains, a couple of taxis, and I'm ready for this week's Part 2 podcast. Steve Cording is with me in the studio. A second outing for you this, Steve. How are you first?
Yeah, I'm getting ready to count my overtime, Lowell. Thank you very much. But it is nice to see you back. We still want to know what the story is behind you wearing that Wales shirt. The picture has appeared on social media. There has been a lot of reaction. Was it a bet or were you brainwashed by Sarah Elgin?
Well, I wasn't brainwashed by Sarah, but and it wasn't a bet. But for those of you who know and followed my rugby career, Wales are not the only team that begin with W. I actually played for Wasps. And of course, the attack coach for Wales is Alex King, my great mate. And the head coach for Wales is also Warren Gatland, who I spent many, many glorious years with, as well as the physio Prav and a number of other of the backroom staff. So I have a close affinity to Wales. And do you know what it was? ITV took me out there and I just felt... Everyone keeps saying to me, how's it going in France? And I haven't actually been to France yet. I was in a studio in Ealing on a green screen. So I haven't watched a live game and I really wanted to. I'm due out there in the quarterfinals and I picked an absolute cracker because it was just a brilliant game. And I thought at the end of the game, it's a toss-up between wearing an Australian shirt or wearing a Welsh shirt. I thought if I wear a Welsh shirt, people might think I'm wearing a British and Irish Lions shirt. But
you were trying to hide it. Oh, I see. There was meaning behind it at least. But how was that experience though? Because obviously you're saying that's you in France for the first time. Did it feel like there was a World Cup on? It
did. I mean, I've got to say it's always an amazing experience, and France deserve enormous credit for what they've done. However, it's not straightforward in the stadiums. You know, getting in and out stadiums not great. I wouldn't like to say that the fan experience is the worst I've ever had, but it certainly is not easy. I don't think they maybe anticipated how popular this tournament would be. I mean, there were thousands of Irish fans, Welsh fans, English, French. I mean, all 4 teams, and we'll talk about this later, are topping the pools in the World Cup. But it's usual travel chaos. I mean, I know you'd like to conveniently believe that I overslept and missed my flight. That wasn't actually the case.
Are you telling me there was a Welshman called Lawrence Dallaglio who's actually sat in your seat on the way back then? Is that why you couldn't get on your plane?
All I'm saying is that there was no plane. And actually, I'm not the only one. There was quite a few flights cancelled back from France. So usual travel chaos, usual French response. It's not our problem. Shrug of the shoulders, puff of the cheeks. So their team may be brilliant, but some of their logistics have got to leave a lot to be desired.
Well, you are travelling again a little bit later this afternoon, so we can't keep you or our special guest for too long because you're actually off on the fun bus this evening. But there's a great old friend of yours, if you'd like to introduce him, who's on us with the pod today.
Well, I mean, every guest is a special guest, but in this case, he's a very special guest. I'm delighted to welcome a good mate of mine onto the podcast. If I read out his list of achievements, I think we'll be here till the next World Cup. But suffice to say, he's been awarded just about every single accolade going in rugby. And to top it all, he's a thoroughly decent bloke. It's everyone's favourite fun bus. The man of the moment, of course, is Jason Leonard. Jason, how are you?
I'm all right, Lol, yeah.
Enjoying the World Cup so far?
Yeah, I've got to say, it's been quite exciting. Haven't been over there yet, but I hope to get over for some other games. It's been great watching some of the matches on TV. Thoroughly exciting at this moment in time, and hopefully it can continue.
Now, could I just say it is an honour and a privilege to be sitting with 2 England World Cup winners in the same room, which is something for me. But you two have obviously known each other for God knows how many years. I would imagine it's more than half your life. But can you actually remember the first time that you met in a rugby context?
Well, I can remember seeing Jason at his own rugby club, actually Barking. I played for Middlesex against Eastern Counties under-18s, and I thought it's an amazing rugby club, Barking, and it was a shrine to Jason, actually, because I think every single poster or jersey on the wall was his, quite rightly, and he was holding court at the end of the bar, and I thought, better of going to introduce myself because there was a long queue, put it that way, to go and speak to him. But I think earlier, Jason, it's probably 93 when I walked into the England team hotel, which was the Petersham in Richmond, and I'd just been selected to be part of the squad. I hadn't played a game, and I walked in, and to be fair, Jason, I mean, in those days, there was no money, it was amateur. I was just so excited to be picked for England, and I wanted to get there, obviously, early, unwrap all my kit bag and just look at my England kit. And I got halfway through the door, Jason came over and he introduced himself. He went, "You're Lawrence, aren't you?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm Jason." And I was like, "Well, yeah, I know who you are, but obviously if you're going to introduce yourself." He goes, "Don't worry about checking in. You've got plenty of time to do that." He said, "Just pop your bags down." He said, "We're just popping down the road for a little flyer." So I had my first big decision to make. But obviously it was Jason, so I said, "That's fantastic." Obviously, put the bags down. So I arrived at the England team hotel without actually checking in. And Jason did pop down the road for a flyer. And I nearly missed the team meeting the following day, let's put it that way. We had a fantastic time, and we've been mates ever since.
So obviously it's 20 years since the fantastic day that we all remember, 2003, when England won the World Cup. I have to admit that I have cheated slightly to get my inside information using the Boys of Winter, which fantastic book that Lawrence has written with Owen Slott. Now, there's a lot in there. You, Jason, probably have more mentions, I think, than any other player.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah, but one of the things that fascinated me was, particularly early on, you mentioned there about the Petersham Hotel, but obviously the England team moved to Pennyhill Park. Were you two roommates straight away? Did you share a room?
I think at the very start, Clive had us in single rooms.
Yeah.
Because that was a big thing. Because in the amateur days, even when Clive was playing, you shared a room. Now, when you've got two rugby blokes in a room, these rooms are not very big. And you're getting in each other's way.
About as big as a studio, probably.
Exactly. Well, yeah, a bit neater than this, actually. And so Clive, when he come in, said, "No, we're not doing that no more. We used to do that when I was playing." So he took us somewhere else where he actually found out it was the All Blacks that used to stay there. And he said, "Well, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us." Yeah. So he kicked them out. He literally booted out the All Blacks and said, "We're staying there now." And it was a fantastic base for us.
I think in the early days, Clive wanted to create an atmosphere and an environment that was so good that you couldn't wait to get into your car and get to England training. And that's exactly what he did. Yeah. Obviously, he's not shy of spending a pound note, Clive. Jason Robertson cost a lot of money. The Pennyhill Park cost a lot of money, and the budget was building up. And I think as we got to the World Cup, we were there for the best part of about 3 or 4 months of the year. And so, rooming together, one, obviously is good fun, and two, need to save a bit of money, I think, because there's a lot of players there.
Well, your room was nicknamed the West Wing, is that right? Is that what did you manage to get in there that got it called the West Wing?
Home comforts. Home comforts would be the word.
Yeah, I mean, we spent the best part of nearly a year there, on and off. And Jason and I were very lucky because we didn't live too far away. He was in Twickenham and I was just up the road in Richmond. But we had a lovely man, Michael, who was the concierge, and naturally, we just felt we needed to extend the room with a few little additions: fridge, microwave, television,
coffee
machine.
Yeah, exactly.
All the things you'd expect at home, really. So
just to keep you nice and comfortable.
Well, not just us. I mean, it ended up being a little bit of a focus point for players coming around that just want to get away and stuff like that. So they'll come to our room. We backed out, actually, because you had a 9-hole golf course, didn't you, at the back of Pennyhill Park? We backed out onto one of the holes. And we had a little patio there, and dare say it, a couple of our guys, even in those very early days of professionalism, still loved a cigarette or two.
A bit of a puff now and again.
So it was a perfect place to go out there.
Who was the worst offender of that? Phil Vickery, was that right?
Fair, a little roll up for the little Gloucester front row men, and they used to come in and go, "Let's just see how the other half live." I think they enjoyed that. We had great times there.
Now, 2003 was your fourth World Cup. I just want to take you back to your first one, 91, which I remember fondly. I was a student in 91. Obviously, it was largely based in the UK and England. However, having gone on the road to win in Paris, a game that I drove to in my parents' car, they didn't know I was driving in my parents' car because they were away in Hong Kong. So And then the following weekend, drove up to Edinburgh to see you in the semi-final. My dad got back after his trip away, and he's an accountant. The first thing he did was he looked at the mileometer and he went, "Where the hell have you been
That's
for the last
because you
few
needed
weeks?"
one of Jason's mates just to sort that out, that mileometer.
To turn it back. Yeah, well, that would have helped. But
Should have driven backwards. Should have driven backwards.
But then obviously we had the final at Twickenham, which England sadly lost 12-6. Now, I didn't realise until I read the book how much that actually affected you, that defeat, and also Brian Moore. So clearly it was something that affected you as a team. You obviously carried that through as motivation through to 2003.
Yeah, I mean, at the time in '91, it was very sharp in that aspect. And for other players like Brian, it was even sharper because some of the other players, even players a generation on Moro, they was never going to go to another World Cup. That was their last chance in that aspect. And it was a World Cup at home as well. Brian had the chance to go to another World Cup. He went to '95, he went to South Africa. But in South Africa, it was literally the emergence of a young Jonah Lomo in that aspect, in the New Zealand side, and a fantastic South African team that was literally being cheered on by every single person in South Africa. So we didn't really have a chance in '95. So I think when you miss an opportunity like that, a life-changing opportunity, that hits you hard. And that hit me hard, Moro harder, as I said. But I suppose as I knew I had other World Cups in me. So there was always another chance. And by the time I think 2003 come along, we was the best team in the world. We hadn't really lost. We lost one game over 18 months playing against France away, where we put out a second team, they put out their first team, and they only just beat us. And again, it was just that it was there in the back of your mind, and also to tell the players as well. I've been here before. I've been in a World Cup final, and I know how painful it is to lose one as well.
Was that of the four? I mean, you mentioned '95 and '99. I guess those two, you never felt that confidence that you felt in 2003 that we could actually win this.
I think, again, once you pull on that shirt, you think you can beat anyone, really. But again, it's just sometimes you have games. Like we beat an Australian side in '95 that was roughly, not completely, but more or less the side that beat us in '91. And we beat them in a quarter-final, and maybe we thought we'd cracked it, really. Here we go.
Yeah. Then Jonah Lomo popped up,
then the semi-final, this bloke called Jonah Lomo come along and was a wrecking ball, and that was our lot, sort of thing like that.
I guess it was always probably destiny, though, that South Africa were going to win that tournament.
And also, I think the thing for Jason is that I certainly started to read some of the press in 2003 just before the final, and for all those players who played in '91, Jason represented something to them, to be able to. I mean, obviously not completely change. You can't turn back time, but I think by winning, strangely, I think that gave probably them a little bit of, a chapter that they could close in there. Do you know what I mean? To a certain extent, because I think they felt that Jason being part of that team and actually extracting that revenge, albeit however many years later, was a bit of a therapy for them.
Definitely. I mean, I'm going forward then to 2003. I mean, without dwelling too much on the officiating on the day, which obviously was questionable to say the least, and I think probably still frustrates the hell out of both of you. I mean, clearly your experience on that day from reading the book, what you were able to do and to say, particularly to Andre Watson when you came on for extra time, made a big difference. Now, everybody says that Jonny Wilkinson won us the World Cup, but was it actually Jason Leonard that won us the World Cup with a little word in the referee's ear?
I'm always going to say that is the case.
It was two Jasons. It was Jason Robinson and Jason Leonard.
Yeah. It's like anything else. Again, the referee told us let the game go. We thought he stuck to that for a good sort of, I want to say 50, 60 minutes. And then all of a sudden, he changed. How he was refereeing the game changed. His attitude towards us changed.
But that was our fault, wasn't it, really?
Well, again, that was frustration coming in from our point of view, which was bubbling over, which he's very much a referee like that as well. He's a yes, sir, no, sir, 3 bags full, sir. You can't do anything in front of him. If you query him, he will that will get his back up, sort of thing like that. So you've got to go with the flow and approach him properly. So I'd been telling Clive, and only because of the way the game was going, with about 20 minutes, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, every sort of 5 minutes, I was grabbing one of the guys on the side who were all mic'd up to the coaches in the box. And I was just literally getting their earpiece, going like, just get me in here, get me in the game, get me in the game. And I didn't get on with 20 minutes to go. I didn't get on with 15 minutes to go. I didn't get on with 10 minutes to go. Literally, by the time they then equalised, the whistle went and we all got together. And Clive's got to go around to a few people. And he come up to me and he said, "You're on." And I can't tell you what I exactly said to him, but it was along the lines of "It's about time." And that was the thing. I just went on the pitch. I saw Jono. I just said, "Jono, this is what we're going to do. We're not going to push on their ball. We're not going to push on our ball. We'll just keep them up. Just keep the scrum nice and square. It won't be a problem."
Sometimes as a referee and as a player, you need a change of voice and a change of picture. And referees always talk about this. You need to change the picture. I mean, he was getting bags of it. I mean, I actually, for once in my life, I actually kept there's that famous De Niro face. I gave away the penalty, but Jono was giving him absolutely pelters, and Dorse was probably chipping in, and he wasn't having any of it. So Jason came in there and just went to him and just said, "Andre,
calmed it all down.
If there's any issues in the scrum, speak to me."
That's most probably the most civil conversation an Englishman had with him for about half an hour.
Yeah.
So
miraculously, he managed not to swear.
and it was, and he actually said thank you. So he's under a lot of pressure, not only with the game and the thousands of people watching, millions around the world, but he's also got one of his own sort of marking his performance, whether it's good or bad, or get him out for the next World Cup. He's no good and all this. So he's got a load of pressures as well. So again, my approach was to come on the pitch and just calm everything down and just say, "Look, sir, you know me. I go forwards, I go backwards. I don't go up and I don't go down in the scrum. You won't get any penalties out of me." And he actually said, "Thank you very much, Jason."
I'm not sure I've seen you go backwards very much, Jason, but in fairness to Andre Watson, at least the referee didn't decide the outcome of the game.
The Evening Standard Rugby Podcast with Lawrence Dallaglio.
Staying on the theme of front row, Jason, the great Wasp and England man, Paul Rendell, we lost him sadly to MND this June. I think it'd be lovely just a few words about him. He was obviously someone that you looked up to along with the rest of that England front row, and you spent quite a lot of the last few weeks of his life with him, and we really miss him, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, he was a character, and he was just one of these guys. No matter where he would be, he could generate fun, and he was one of these people that people would gravitate to because you knew wherever he was, there was fun, there was mischief going on, there was something was going on. Something was going on, and for me, as a young kid coming into the side early, he was very gracious when he realised that I was basically going to be taking his place, and he helped me a hell of a lot. But even post his career, and we stayed close and always catching up, and always a lunch here and a few drinks here and stuff like that. Even when we went round to his place in Slough, and me and a few mates, we all helped him relay his patio, and I mean he loved that because he was in a wheelchair by the time. But I remember sort of nearly 30 years prior to that, I remember him doing the original patio. Yeah. And talk about what a big deal it was.
That was how you got paid in rugby in those days. God knows what was under that patio.
And I've got to say this now. So, like 30 years later, you go there, and it's just a wash of sleeping policemen, sort of like it's bumps everywhere, sort of like that. So we had to dig it up, and there's so much sand and there's so much concrete in there now. I've got to say that now. A plane from Heathrow could land in his backyard, and it ain't gonna move that patio. I'll tell you that now. But it was just brilliant because it was there for him, and we all wanted to do that for him in that aspect, and the smile on his face, and every day he was having fun with us and stuff like that.
Yeah. But what I love as well about that team as well is they were proper nicknames, weren't they? So you got the Judge, you got Fun Bus. You're not putting an E on the end of players' names.
I always laugh because we used to take the Mickey out of the Kiwis. with their sort of nicknames, which wasn't too
elaborate
in that aspect. But then saying that we've got a Jono, so I'd always laugh. We'd always take the mickey out of the Kiwi saying, "Oh, cool, you're not really imaginative in that aspect." Then you go, "Hold on, we call Jono." So then like that, it's not exactly rocket science in that aspect. So.
Yeah. But going back to 2003 then, I mean, what would you say to both of you really is, I mean, what's your undying memory of that tournament? Because it was one where England were favourites to win, but there were struggles along the way, weren't there? It wasn't as straightforward as just winning the game. But
our friend Joe Marler was sort of saying, he's a friend of this podcast, he's a good lad, and I know Jason's, helped him out throughout his career in the same way maybe Judge did, but he was saying, well, there's nothing wrong with winning ugly, but we obviously went into that tournament as the number one side. We knew that we had a really good chance of winning. I don't think I've been involved in any World Cup before that, certainly where I felt like we were going to win. We were still going into the unknown. So we did make hard work of it for ourselves. And when we chucked 16 on the pitch, we got all sorts going on. I mean, I think once we got through the South Africa game, which was a tough game for us, we, a bit like Ireland have just done actually. We felt like, right, that's it now. We can go. And then the quarter final against Wales was problematic, but we won comfortably in the end. And I think just getting ourselves to a semi-final, that is when I think for me, everyone just chilled out, didn't they? Just suddenly we got back to Sydney, got back to Manly, we'd beaten Wales comfortably, and we knew we were playing France, and all the press then turned towards France because they were brilliant apparently. And then we just got in a happy place, didn't do any training, just chilled out. And Clive trusted us eventually. It took him a bit of time. He did trust us just to go, look, we're all okay, we'll get this right. And we just had to get the job done, really. Good side, Australia. We've beaten them 6 times, and they actually played very well in the final for them against us. We made hard work of it, but that's English sporting history, isn't it? We love it. We love a bit of extra time.
Yeah,
we love a drama.
We certainly do. I mean, was it the celebrations afterwards that you're going to remember the most, or was it winning moment when the ball went over the post from Jonny, or what picks out for you?
I would say it is
probably the changing room, isn't it? After the game,
I would say the changing room. I said when you look around and you see the people that you're with, and mindful of the fact that was a very tight squad. Yeah. We'd been through ups and downs as a team for club and country, and quite a few of the players in that room had personal bereavement. They had other things going on in their lives, and we were a tight group. We were there for each other, and I think the nicest thing I think, even though seeing the ball go over is great, the sort of celebrations afterwards, brilliant, was actually being in that room and looking around that I'm chuffed for him, I'm chuffed for Martin Johnson, I'm chuffed for Will Greenwood, I'm chuffed for Neil Back. And I know that those guys are also looking at me going, I'm glad that we've won this for Jace because of 1991 and stuff like that. I think
there was a realisation as well, because we've been so tight for 6 years, really, since 97. When Clive took over, then we had all that disappointment, 99. But you knew that we only had about an hour together in the dressing room, and there was tears, there was like laughter, there was every emotion. And you knew that when we walked out the door in about an hour's time, that team would never well, maybe we didn't know that, but it was never going to be the same again because, some people retired, some people were injured, and you've just won a World Cup. And whether you like it or not, your life is never the same after that because everyone wants a piece of you immediately. So I think it's just that moment, that memory of being together and there was all the players who didn't get to play, who were, who've given a lot to England, all the coaches, all the backroom staff, and it was good. And look, we were world champions at celebrating long before we won the World Cup. We were good at that. and two of the leaders of that particular charge are sat here with you now. I mean, it was we were very good at that. It was just nice to have something we could really celebrate. And I don't think, Jason and I were thinking, so many England fans out there, but what you hadn't really appreciated is what was going on back home. Because for you, I don't know if you were there, but 10 o'clock in the morning in your local rugby club, drinking pints of Guinness with the full English and watching your team win. And, let's hope that we can have those feelings again. It won't be 10 o'clock in the morning, but
No,
it might be Ireland, it might be England, it might be France. Who knows?
Yeah,
it might be Wales. There's so many good performances. Normally
great.
you get a right load of ear roll if you're having drinks at 10 o'clock in the morning.
But that way you got away with it. But one thing, I mean, you talk about you being a tight knit group. Obviously, 31 great members of that squad.
Yeah.
Is it slightly disappointing for both of you that of that 31, only Richard Hill now is on a permanent RFU contract and nobody else is involved? Jason, you've obviously had your time as president of the RFU, but do you feel like they should be leaning more on you to help going forward?
I think previously, maybe. I know Clive, funny enough, was back in the day was talking about players at the time and how would they make it into coaching? Could he help them into coaching in that aspect? I think he sort of earmarked a couple that could be possible coaches. And I suppose once Clive had then left and moved on, then that idea really left with him in that aspect. So I think back in the day, I think it would have been a very positive thing to do. Obviously, as you get further away from it, less so in that aspect. But yeah, no, I think it's something that we could have done better. But again, there's so many aspects. I mean, I think
sometimes you put so much into winning it, which we all do, that you just can't do that again. You know what I mean? I promise you now, it's like
I've heard Lowell say it a couple of times. It's you put so much in, and you achieve that, but you don't actually think about what's happening after that because you're so caught up in that, and it's taken you so much to get there as well. But how many times do we sit down and go, right, what are we doing after this now? And I think we sort of said that from 2003 to 2007, didn't we?
None of us had a sabbatical. Common sense would have said, why don't you just take a year off? And
well, you went straight back to playing, didn't you?
Yeah, so. And so did Jason, and we both played in the Six Nations after that. But also the following summer, we went down to New Zealand and Australia and got battered by 50 points in 3 test matches, which is not really the way it should be. So I think there's, and there's been one or two. Martin Johnson was given the coaching job, but without any support around him. So I think you do feel, I know Jason shares this with me. England have been in 2 finals since then. I was involved in one in my last game for England, and then we lost again in Japan. That doesn't give us any pleasure to watch an England team lose a final. No. We're all of the same camp that we want other players to share that experience and to have those feelings that we had. And that's the biggest disappointment, I suppose, or the legacy is that you can blame the RFU, you can blame players, you can blame a whole load of people, but we should have kicked on and we should have built on that. We haven't got exclusivity to win every title because Ireland, France and Wales and Scotland and Italy are good sides, but we should have won a few more. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, well, 2 of the legacies that you have created are the fantastic charities that you both are involved with, the Atlas Foundation, obviously Delalio Rugby Works. Now, you're both off in the next 5 minutes to go on the fun bus to help raise some more funds. First of all, how do I get an invite to the fun bus? What goes on there? But secondly, and more importantly, how proud of you of the work that you've done with your charities?
Firstly, you're not invited.
Yeah.
You might be kidnapped if you're not invited.
Secondly, can't really tell you what goes on.
What happens on the fun bus stays on the fun bus. Yeah, fair enough.
But it's just a great idea to help charities raise money, and all charities are screaming out at this moment in time. All charities, great charities. Lawrence's charity is a great charity. Atlas Foundation is a great charity. So if we can do stuff that helps our charities but helps other charities as well, then we're keen to do that.
For some reason, Jason's created this aura around him that everyone wants to pay money to go out and have a drink with him. So if we can include, I was never too far behind him. So listen, Atlas is a global charity that does amazing projects all around the world for underprivileged kids and uses rugby as a force for good. Rugby Works is a similar charity that uses rugby as a force for good to help young people turn their lives around in the UK. So we've got a good fit together. If they can survive a trip on the fun bus with me and Jason, they can survive pretty much anything in life. Let me tell you that.
Get through that.
So it will be good fun. If you put a bit of money in both charities, you might find you might get an invite then. You might get a little email invite.
Is there any ambitions left for you now that you want to get either back involved in the game, or is there anything different? Have you taken up cycling, or was that's in the book that he's just taken it up?
He's been president of the RFU. He's been chairman of the Lions. He's
done.
He's pretty much done it all, really. So
I've got no intention to do cycling like him and Jono and stuff like that. I mean, my backside on a racing saddle is not a pretty solid.
Not sure we've got enough saddles, mate, to
that's
be
like
honest.
a razor blade to me. That is. So no, definitely not.
Well, Jason, we've been asking all of our guests the same question. Who do you think, now that we're moving towards the business end, who do you think will make it to that final in Paris? And if I had to put you on the spot, I know your heart says one thing, probably the same as me, but who do you think will win it? So who do you think will be in the final? And who do you think will win it? Because it's not as easy a question as if you asked this before the tournament, you'd have one answer. But actually, it's been there's a lot of moving parts. France with all these injuries, South Africa now, they've lost the game. Can they come back? Ireland, I hope they might win it. But after they've just beaten South Africa, you might start to believe they can now. And England and Wales, who have come from nowhere, everyone's looking at them. But there's so many different parts to it, isn't there?
I think before the tournament kicked off, I was thinking France, New Zealand. Even I was actually thinking in that, excuse me, that opening match, New Zealand would have over France. Yeah. And then actually that sends them the other way around. They meet in the final, and I was thinking France would have them in the final with the emotion and the home crowd and stuff like that.
Is that changed now? It probably has a little bit.
when you saw South Africa smash the All Blacks at Twickenham, and obviously France beating New Zealand. So I'm a little bit like you. I've got to say this now. The way I'm looking at it is, and I've got to say this, they're one that me and you would support anyway because of the British and Irish Lions and stuff like that. I would love to see a home nations team, Northern Hemisphere side win it, but especially England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, obviously because we're very proud.
Do you think there's a few parallels with that Ireland team? Because I was reading a statistic that they are the number one side in the world, but yet we couldn't go under the radar as the number one side because everyone wanted to talk about it. But Ireland seems to have arrived at this World Cup. They've lost, I think, 2 games in the last 35 or something. It's an unbelievable, similar to what we were. And we went on and won the World Cup. And I think if people really truly appreciate what they've done, it looks like if they get through New Zealand, which is, well, they've got to get through Scotland first, but if they get through and they win the group, there's no reason. Would we have won the World Cup without Jonny Wilkinson? I keep saying we're not sure, but luckily we didn't have to find out. Yeah. Can they win without Johnny Sexton? Not sure, but hopefully they don't have to find out.
I've got to say, I'm liking the look of this Irish team because they know how to win a game.
They've got a bit of old school dog, like amateur rugby players.
You have a look at some of those boys there that have been around a long time. They've got
pure
a load of
professional
knowledge. A load of knowledge how to win games, edge out games.
Peter Mahoney.
And we were similar in that aspect. We just knew how to win a game in that aspect, depending what the weather was, the condition was, whether he was playing well. The referee, as we said, the referee takes a big chunk of that as well. So I've got to say, I'm hoping that they're going to be there in that aspect if they can carry on. The difference we had, and you sort of half alluded to it, is, don't you remember, I think it was prior to the World Cup where Clive said, look, we're the best team in the world. I can't go into into the press conferences anymore and lie through my teeth and say, we're the underdogs. He said, I feel two-faced. Yeah. He said, so I'm now going to start saying, you're right, we are the favourites and we do expect to win today, which really set sort of everything off, really, because everyone was saying, oh, here we go and all this. But he said, I can't lie no more, sort of thing like that, where I don't think Ireland's had that pressure at this moment in time. But I think they will do now, because I think if you have a look at that game at the weekend,
everybody now
that's what everyone's saying.
It's funny, isn't it? Because you both mentioned it as well, and Lols even started wearing a Welsh shirt. But I think we all feel that need for either another UK winner or a Northern Hemisphere winner, don't we?
No one admitted it at the time, but I know that there were Scots, Welsh and Irish all cheering England to beat Australia in that World Cup final. Now, whether they wanted to admit it to their families or not, I don't really care. But
well, Keith Wood said it to you, didn't he, beforehand?
Because at that time, it was a North v South thing, Southern Hemisphere, you know.
Right, Lawrence, we need to revisit the highlight of the weekend from you. It's time for you to choose your big match moment.
The big match moment with the Samsung Galaxy Tab S9 Ultra. Bring the big match to an expansive display.
It's just an incredible weekend of rugby, really. First of all, a big shout out to the fact that all 4 Northern Hemisphere teams are leading the pools. clearly the Ireland-South Africa match was the match of the weekend in terms of the result, the intensity, everything in that about that. And if there was a moment just before that game, I think it was the Peter O'Mahony team talk out on the pitch, which certainly got the Irish team and pack fired up for what was an absolutely brutal test match. But really, I thought the performance, relatively speaking, of the weekend came from Wales. I'm all about the Welsh this weekend. I don't know what's come over me.
You are. Did you actually learn any Welsh while you're out there? Can you?
I think there might be some. I'm not worried about wearing the Welsh jersey, but there might be some footage of me singing some Welsh songs, which could be really, really worrying. But look, there was some. 40 points to 6. An amazing performance. I thought the individual performance of Anscombe, who came on for bigger, was exceptional. But actually, what epitomised the Welsh performance was Jack Morgan. I know I'm biased, and I know he's in the back row, but what a captain, what a player. And there was a moment in that game where he picked up a loose line-out throw off the back of the line-out, wearing 7, not 8. And instinctively, he just put boot to ball, and I think it was just an enormous kick. It was a 50-22, bounced just outside the 22. I mean, he was deep in his own 22, so it was an enormous kick. And obviously he put that little bit of swerve on the ball and it just rolled into touch. And it felt like a defining moment in that game because I don't think Australia scored another point after that. And they were well and truly battered. And I just think that young man has been, for me, one of the standout players of the tournament so far. And he ain't finished yet. So that is my moment of the match.
Excellent.
Well, game by game, we're getting ever closer to seeing who is going to make it through to the quarterfinals. It's a weekend off for England, but we'll be back next week when Sarah will be with us too. But for now, my thanks to Jason, my thanks to Steve, and of course, thank you to you all for listening. We'll see you next week. Right, Jason, it's time for you and I to get on that fun bus. All aboard.
The Evening Standard Rugby Podcast with Lawrence Dallaglio.